Boy, oh boy, if I would have told you 48 hours ago that in the span that concluded our NFL playoff preview episodes until now, sitting Thursday night, January 11th, 9:50 p.m., that Pete Carroll, Bill Belichick, and Nick Saban would all do some variation of either step down, part ways, or retire with their respective programs and or teams. I don't know what I would have told you. I don't know how I would have reacted. I don't know how my partner Emmy would have reacted if I told him that when we signed off on Tuesday night. But here we are. Welcome in, everybody. It's Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports, emergency episode number 42. We got a loaded show. The biggest news in sports for the past 48 hours, for the most part, has all been coaching news, whether that's college or pro football. It's all been coaching news for the most part. We're going to dive deep into the Nick Saban retirement announcement, what it means for Alabama, what does Nick Saban's future look like, who are the candidates, who would be the best hire at Bama. There's already been one big name that is out of the running, as he announced today on his Twitter. We'll talk about that as well. Could Sark be in the running for that as well? I know Texas fans are a little bit worried about that. We're going to get into each show from now on. We're going to address one program's portal moves outside of just Texas. And today we'll be diving into Ohio State. They've done some interesting things here in the past week. And then we're also going to talk about some Texas coaching stuff that's gone on in the past week or two with Steve Sarkisian's staff, that there's some interesting conversation to be had there. Make sure you like and subscribe. And if you're watching live, put your comments, questions, opinions in the chat. Welcome, Emmy. How are you tonight?
I'm good, man. Was watching some basketball earlier. The Bucks absolutely smacked the Boston Celtics. That was surprising to watch, to say one thing, but it's not even close to the most surprising thing that has happened in the last 24 hours. They call it Black Monday for a reason in the NFL, but the Nick Saban retiring news, we'll get into it, but man, caught me completely off guard.
College football never stops. The season doesn't stop, as Josh Pate likes to say. There might not be games going on, but the season does not stop. From now on, one program per episode. I chose Ohio State for today. I thought they've made some interesting moves at the quarterback position in particular. Also, the running back position. They got a big commitment a couple days ago from a former Ole Miss running back that you may or may not know. They also went out and got one of Bama's offensive linemen from the portal. So they've been active in the portal. In the future, we'll be covering programs like Oregon and Michigan and all the big name programs that you see that have been active in the portal. We'll be getting into that. But let's start with this Nick Saban news. Let's just start with your initial reaction when you saw the news.
Well, initial reaction was shock. I mean, I already put that out there. But on top of that, you read the ticker at the bottom of your screen watching, the college basketball game that I happened to be watching at the time, Mississippi State and Tennessee. You read the ticker at the bottom, you see 6 championships at Alabama in 12 seasons, 7 in total, the most championships in a 12-season span in college football history. And, the numbers are one thing. The numbers, we all know them. But just to have that all put into perspective, I mean, college football will never be the same again. The SEC will never be the same again without Nick Saban and his presence at Alabama. It's a little crazy, man. It's a little crazy to think about the fact that Coach K and Nick Saban, was it back-to-back years that they subsequently retired.
Yeah, in a span of about a year,
Yeah.
Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, Coach K, and Nick Saban have all retired or
Feels like my childhood is
moved
dying.
on. It doesn't feel like Belichick's officially done yet,
Yeah.
but the other three have retired, and they're all legends in their own right. For me, there was a part of me that knew this was coming sometime soon, but I didn't necessarily expect it this year. But I think it's interesting. I'd say my reaction was okay. Wow, that happened. Uh, the funny thing is, if you read the intel, he was actually interviewing an assistant coach for a job 10 minutes before he went and told his team that he was going to retire. Yes. And he showed up to work today. The day after he's officially retired to do more of that stuff. Um, and I think it's just like administrative stuff he's got to do. Talk to his players. You have exit meetings,
Right.
all that kind of stuff. He wants to help. He of course wants to still be around the Alabama program and help them transition into whoever that new guy is going to be. Uh, we'll get into his future in particular um, here in a little bit, but I was a little surprised and shocked at the timing of this because what's interesting about the timing is the entire landscape of college football is shifting now. It's never going to be the same. Not only is the world of college football not going to feel the same without the presence of a legend like Nick Saban, but the entire landscape across the country is changing. It's never going to be the same as it was this year and in the past 2 decades. Um, we're we're pretty much moving to two power conferences and then a bunch of good conferences, but conferences that most likely can't compete with the two power conferences. That's what it's going to be in 2024. We're also moving to a 12-team playoff and a whole new structure in college football. The transfer portal and NIL, there's still yet to be the guardrails that we've been looking for put in to these different rules to, you know, bring that in a little bit so it's not off the rails free agency. We're still looking for that. We're still looking for a central leader. How do we fix these issues in college football? And I think thinking about it now for about a little over 24 hours, and this has been brought up on a couple different podcasts, I think it's possible that, and it's been reported that Saban may have actually told his team this when he announced his retirement to the team, that just like everything has just become a little too much for him. Like the old ways of doing things, the things that he did that made him great. And he has adjusted over the past couple of years, but I think it's just he finds himself in a situation where it's just too much.
Yeah.
And he would rather, I think, spend his time at the age of 72, 73 years old with nothing really more to prove at all, doing other things than trying to adjust and to all these new things in college football.
Yeah. And to add on that thought, I read up a little bit, and apparently his wife is showing early signs of Alzheimer's. So that played into it as well. And that was another angle that I thought of, the fact that college football, everything that's changing, everything that's going on. Saban has been one of the coaches that has been vocal about how he feels about things and where college football is right now. And I wouldn't say he was overly negative about things, but he definitely didn't feel great about the things that were going on. That's for sure. Um, it's gonna be interesting to see where this whole saga goes, and that job at Alabama. I can't wait to see who they hire. Like that's gonna be like following up Nick Saban, like that's
We're
a
gonna
tough
get
job
in.
to have.
We're gonna get into that here pretty soon. I'm pretty sure this is just a jokingly comment, but thank you, John Sam, for this. Uh, I'm assuming very sarcastic chat here. Alabama has intensified their search, and they have zeroed in on West Virginia's Neil Brown. Saban has a close relationship with Brown and is strongly pushing Bama officials to hire him. Good one. Good one, John. If that happens, I will be very, 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 very surprised. And I'm sure that would send shockwaves throughout the world, not just the sport of college football, if that happened. But thank you for your engagement. Nevertheless,
Hey, I mean, he doubled down. He says Bama beat reporter tweeted it. I mean, that you might be onto something. I don't know who Neil Brown is, so I'm not going to go on the record saying you're wrong. So I'm not going to comment on that.
which Bama beat reporter tweeted it? I need to know more information. And is he verified on Twitter? But I haven't
You never
seen
know
it.
these things.
I'm checking right now. If it's true, then I don't know. Maybe that's the candidate that they settled in on. We will see. But before we jump into the candidates, I wanted to go through kind of his legacy and talk about some mind-boggling numbers that I'm sure you've already heard or you might already know, but some of these you might not have seen yet. So first of all, 261. Alabama was ranked number 5 in the final AP poll that was released a couple days ago. It's the 261st straight week the Crimson Tide had been ranked amongst the top 25, which is
Wow.
the longest active streak in college football. And it more than doubles the second place team for most weeks consecutively in the top 25. That would be Georgia at 114. Saban, in his 17 seasons in Tuscaloosa, had a 206-29 record. He won 206 games, had 29 total losses in 17 seasons. In his first year in Tuscaloosa, he lost 6 games. So really, when you think about it, if you take out that first year, he only lost 23 games in 16 seasons in Tuscaloosa. He averaged 12.4 victories per season in his time in Tuscaloosa. And in total, for his career, he finished with 297 on-field coaching victories as a head coach at the college ranks. Over his time in Tuscaloosa, 123 total Crimson Tide players under his tutelage were drafted in the NFL. 123. And the 2018 draft class was Alabama's largest in program history when they had 12 players drafted in that particular draft.
And to put it this way, 123 players, that's 4 rounds of draft picks on his own accounted for.
Yep.
So that's pretty insane.
And think about this stat. 66. This year, Terry and Arnold, Kool-Aid McKinstry, and Dallas Turner were all named first team All-Americans. Saban coached 66 first team All-Americans in his career at Alabama. 66. He coached 66 first team All-Americans in his career at Alabama. He had 44 first round picks. So he had 15 more first round picks than he had losses in his career at Alabama. That's all you really need to know about Nick Saban, but I'll keep going. You mentioned this. He led Alabama to 9 national championship game appearances. He won 6 of them. He won in 2009. We all remember that one for the wrong reasons. He won in 2011. He won in 2012. He won in 2015. He won in 2017. And he won in 2020. And he also, people forget this, he won a title at LSU as well back in 2003. So that puts him at 7, which passes Bear Bryant at 6 for the most in college football history. And then under his tutelage, Alabama had 4 Heisman Trophy winners. Mark Ingram, Derrick Henry, Devontae Smith, and Bryce Young all won the Heisman Trophy while Nick Saban was the head coach. And that's really all you need to know. I could go on and on with stats. We could bore you with that all day long. But the one that really stood out to me was 44 first-round picks, 29 total losses at Alabama.
And to think how many of those were bowl games as well. He probably, it's probably an even more insane number when you think about probably only, don't quote me on this, probably only like 17 of them are regular season losses. I mean, the consistency of 10-win seasons has just been, I mean, it's just been locked in every single year, no matter what the quarterback situation was. And he had to adapt. I mean, you mentioned 2009. They won the national championship. I think it was 9-6 or whatever. I remember watching that game live. By the way, that was, oh gosh. But the being able to adapt from having your quarterback be Greg McElroy and the AJ McCarrons of the world to being able to look in the mirror and be like, look over at Cam Newton and Johnny Manziel and be like, I need a quarterback that can do that. And then from that point forward, has been committed to basically having quarterbacks with mobility and having that in his offense. So credit to him on that. He's I mean, the empire that he built at Alabama, like the machine, like, you know, I guess replacement of talent that he had. I mean, it was, we're never going to see that again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. He's no doubt the greatest to ever do it in college football and one of the greatest to ever coach in football, period, at any level. And this is one that I forgot. 11 SEC championships. 11 in 17 years at Alabama. He was a 5-time SEC Coach of the Year. Feels like it should have been more than that, but whatever. He's a 2-time AP Coach of the Year. The accolades, you could go forever. What was your favorite? Do you have, before we move on to candidates to replace Saban, do you have a particular favorite moment of Nick Saban's career at Alabama?
The one that I thought of immediately was the national championship where he switched out Jalen Hurts with Tua Tagovailoa and made that crazy comeback in the second half. I think just the guts and also the culture that you have to be able to do that and not have your starting quarterback, like, you know, feel some type of way about it. Like, obviously, credit to Jalen Hurts, and obviously we know now Jalen is one of the most stand-up dudes in the world of football, period. But the buy-in that was needed, and also just the understanding of what your talent is and what your team needs in that moment. Not every coach would have the guts to do that. Like, most coaches would just be like, we're going down with our guy. And I wouldn't have blamed them for it.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you. Real fast before we move on to coaching candidates, this discussion is fascinating. I think Saban, and he was actually outspoken in an interview today, a sit-down interview with Reese Davis that I haven't watched yet, but I watched Josh Pate's show tonight, and he talked about kind of what was said. And I think the plan for Saban is to still be involved in some way with the Alabama program. He's going to keep his office at Alabama, so he'll be around the program. I'm not sure in what role in particular, but he's just not going to be coaching. So, I mean, for Bama fans, like Nick Saban's not dead. He's still alive. He's still going to be around Alabama. He's still going to be living in Tuscaloosa. He's just not going to be coaching your team no longer. I think he has a seat at the college game day desk waiting for him if he wants it. We've already seen him do some weekly spots on the Pat McAfee show. And I think he wants to do television. I think he's good at television, whether that's for ESPN, Fox, another network. I don't know yet. I'm not sure he's going to be up in the booth calling games. I don't think
Yeah, that's a
that's
little bit too
what
much
I
work,
see
I
him
think.
in. But just certainly at the college game day desk, I could see him there. There are starting to be questions about what does Lee Corso's future look like. So could Saban be the guy that eventually steps into the Lee Corso seat at the college game day desk? And I'm not necessarily talking about like the headgear picks and everything, because I don't know if I see
No one can
Saban
ever
doing
be
that.
Lee Corso, that's for sure.
But he would maybe step into a role as the kind of replacement at the college game day desk. I think he's going to do that. I think he's kind of been foreshadowing that for a while with already being on college game day so often. I think, and apparently he's also mentioned that he wants to be kind of involved in trying to fix some of the ailing problems that we have in college football, which I think is great. When Nick Saban speaks, whether you like him, you love him, or you hate him, you listen. You listen to what he has to say. He has as much credibility as anybody does to speak on these kinds of subjects with what he's done in his career. So why wouldn't you kind of maybe let Nick Saban have a voice in what, how college football moves forward and how we can kind of fix some of these issues that all reside pretty much off the field. They're all off the field issues like NIL. The games are great, but they're all, NIL, realignment, recruiting, the calendar, all that stuff. Why don't you let a guy like Nick Saban, who's been the face of your sport for 20 plus years, have a say in how you proceed in fixing some of those things? I think I don't think Nick Saban's going away by any means and just going to sit on his sofa or chill, somewhere on a lake for the rest of his life. I still think he's going to have a role in the sport of college football, which is good for college football. He's just not going to be coaching anymore.
Yeah, I was thinking more so not in the college game day direction, even though I do think he would be an excellent fit there. I was thinking more so in like the hypothetical if college football were to decide to create, say, like a board of directors type of thing, like a decision making body. I would want Nick Saban a part of that.
Absolutely. And I think he could do both.
Right. Yeah.
Because college game day is only once for 3 hours on Saturday. Now, of course, you got to be involved in like the preparation and the production that goes into that.
Right. And the
But
travel as well.
he would have plenty of time to, uh, do the other things that are associated with the board of directors or whatever comes about there. And I think that would overall, not just Nick Saban being there, but if we actually got a board of directors, it would be excellent for college football. Okay, we'll talk about some of those issues next week. Let's get into coaching candidates. It was released on Twitter earlier today by the man himself that Dan Lanning is staying at Oregon. He said that in a video. You can go find it. He's not going anywhere. Unless he's just completely lying to us, which I don't think Dan Lanning would do. I think he loves it at Oregon. And to be fair, he's building a monster at Oregon right now. They just got Evan Stort in the portal, a former 5-star wide receiver. He's got Dylan Gabriel to transfer there. They're top 10 in recruiting now every single year since he's been there. They're building a monster there. They're going to put a decent amount of players into the NFL. If he wants to stay at Oregon, he can absolutely stay at Oregon. And they're moving into the Big Ten. So he's getting to go to a big conference and he's has stability there. He doesn't have the pressure cooker that would be at Alabama at Oregon. Not to that extent, at least. What names come to mind right now? Like off the top of your head, what are the best candidates in your mind for the Alabama job? If you were the athletic director at Bama, like who's your first call right now?
Jimbo Fisher. No, just kidding. Well, honestly,
Knowing that you cannot call Dan Lanning.
right. I honestly, for SEC football, like it seems to be like these teams tend to hire from within house whenever they have, like, by in-house I mean from within the SEC. Like whether it be an assistant coach from another SEC school or something of that nature. But in this case, I actually think there might be a guy in-house at Alabama that might just be a good fit. I think maybe Alabama should go with someone who's been in the building with Nick Saban and knows the way Nick Saban ran things and can kind of not really emulate it, because you're not going to emulate everything Nick Saban can do, but kind of maintain that level of attention to detail and those types of things with their own obviously personal spin on it. So I would probably look in that direction if I'm Alabama. I don't know if a huge splash hire, like obviously it's on the cards because it's Alabama and they're a premier program, but I don't know if that's really the direction they're going to go.
I tend to disagree with that. I think they are going to try at least for the splash hire. I know for a fact that they did call Steve Sarkisian. I don't think Sark is going to take the job. I mean, why would you go back to Bama when you already set yourself up with everything that you have at Texas? Like anything that Bama could pay Sark, Texas could pay more. Like it's just a fact. Texas has more resources than Alabama does, at least financially, and in NIL. And Texas is moving to the SEC. So it's not like if you're Sark, you're wanting to move from the Big 12 back to the SEC. No, you have a preseason top 5 program moving into the SEC. Like Texas is going to be a preseason top 5 team next year. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know, but I'll bet you anything they will be ranked in the preseason top 5 with the return of Quinn Ewers. So I've been thinking all day since the news came down that Sark's likely not taking the job and Dan Lanning isn't taking the job. There are 2 names that stick out in my mind. Actually 3, but I don't think Dabo is going to take it, even though he is an Alabama alumni. He has connections to Alabama, but I just don't think he's going to take it. And I'm not sure he's the best fit at Alabama. He's not – we've talked about this before. He hasn't completely adjusted to the way of doing things in 2024 of talent acquisition in college football. He hasn't totally embraced the portal yet. And not to say that his approach can't work. It absolutely can work because he's won 2 national championships. And of all the guys that we've honestly are going to talk about today, he's probably the most proven. 2 national championships, like that speaks for itself. At Clemson, they don't get the athletes that Bama, that Georgia, that Texas does. They get good recruits, but they're not putting up top 5 recruiting classes every year like Bama and Georgia are. They're just not. So I don't think, just like I don't think Sark's taking the job, just like I don't think, I know Lanning's not taking the job, and he would have been my number 1 for Alabama, just because he's a dog in recruiting. He knows how to use NIL. He's an SEC guy. He stems from the Saban / Kirby Smart coaching tree. He knows how to coach in the SEC. He's already proven himself now at a major program at Oregon. Like, all of those factors would have made Dan Lanning the perfect fit at Alabama. I think he would have fit perfectly, but he's staying at Oregon. So 2 names have popped up. And they're both like high up on the Vegas betting lists for favorites to land the job. Mike Norvell. Mike Norvell is the first guy that popped in my mind. And here's the reason. Number 1, he's rebuilt Florida State over his 4 years in Tallahassee. They went from just 3 wins in year 1 to the brink of the college football playoff this past year in an undefeated season in Florida State's first SEC championship or ACC championship, in like, I don't know, when was their last one? 7-8 years. He's 47 years old, so he's still relatively young. He's shown the ability to build a program. He only has a buyout of $4 million. And to be honest with you, the future of the ACC is kind of unclear at this point.
Yeah.
If Mike Norvell, who's a really damn good football coach, and I've stood on the table for him before, so this isn't just me jumping on the bandwagon here. If he wants some stability, go to Alabama. I don't know if he's going to get offered the job, but I'm certain, if Alabama gets that down farther list, they would call him. He's a proven head coach at a major program. In his first job at Memphis, he posted a 38-15 record. Now, he doesn't have any SEC experience. He doesn't really have any ties to the SEC, but he's a really good offensive mind. And I think he's a really good recruiter. He knows how to use NIL because Florida State has been at the forefront of that. How'd they get Jared Verse? I mean, how'd they get Keon Coleman? He knows what he's doing, and he knows how to build a program. And then my second call would be Kalen DeBoer. Now, the complicated thing with Kalen DeBoer is he's in the Pacific Northwest. He seems to love Washington. But also, some people are talking about, and I don't know if there's any truth to these rumors, but the Seattle Seahawks job just opened up. And Kalen DeBoer is a guy who's won everywhere that he's been as a head coach. There's a reason that he's 104-12 as a head coach at the college ranks, which is ridiculous. And he just led Washington to the national championship game. And they were within 1 possession going into the fourth quarter. I think Kalen DeBoer is excellent. I think he's like a CEO type, but also an excellent game planner. Again, doesn't really have SEC experience, but he's built the program. He took a Washington program that was 4-8 when he came in. And in his, what was this, his second year? Second or third year at Washington. I think it was his second year. he led them to third year. He led them to the national championship game. He's won everywhere he's been. He's young, 49 years old, proven himself now at a major program. I mean, I think those two guys are like probably the next calls that I would make. I think they check pretty much every box that Alabama's looking for. But to your point, if they didn't go that route, would you potentially go the route of, say, a guy on your staff, like you mentioned? I don't think that's going to happen, but maybe. I can't totally rule it out. Tommy Rees would be the first name that I can think of. Just finished up his first season after coming to the Crimson Tide by way of Notre Dame. And we saw Alabama's offense get better throughout the season. It was a good coaching job, I think, on Jalen Milroe. I think he deserves a lot more credit than he's getting right now for the season that Alabama had. If they were going to hire on staff, he could potentially be a name. Another name that's, I think, a long, long shot, but has been mentioned is Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri.
Yeah, just got an extension, though.
Just got an extension, though, so that's probably not going to happen.
The name that just popped into my head is Kyle Whittingham at Utah.
Might be interesting.
I mean, I know that's I don't think that's on a short list of names, but it's something to think about for sure.
Mm-hmm. I think what's going to happen is one of either Mike Norvell or Kalen DeBoer is going to end up at Alabama, but I could be wrong. I think Daba's a long shot. I think Sark is a long shot. I just don't see those things happening. And then we know Dan Lanning's out. So,
yeah,
I mean,
my thinking on the hiring from within idea was more from the standpoint of I feel like there's a higher chance of keeping some of those highly touted recruits, getting them to stay if it's a guy that they already know and they already know the coaching style of, if that makes sense.
Possibly. That's another thing. That's another part of this conversation that we didn't really talk about is Alabama, the entire Alabama roster now has 30 days to enter the transfer portal.
Yep.
So that could have a trickle-down effect to many programs in college football, including Texas. I know Texas has been sniffing around on Isaiah Bond, the receiver at Alabama. There are probably some other names there. Kendrick Blackshire, the linebacker, he's already in the portal. Texas is bringing him in for a visit this weekend for some linebacker depth. Is basically what they're looking for there, behind Anthony Hill and David Benda, with, of course, the departure of Jalen Ford. So, yes, it could have not only significant trickle-down effects on players leaving, but also assistants leaving. And that's where I guess we'll transition a little bit into these Texas coaching moves that we've seen the past week. Right. The big one of which is Bo Davis, the defensive line coach. It was announced yesterday that he is going back home to his alma mater, LSU, to coach their defensive line. Really good hire here for Brian Kelly. Bo Davis is an excellent football coach, and he was one of the higher paid assistants, not only on Texas's staff, but like higher paid assistant coaches in college football that are not coordinators. Bo Davis's name was up there. He was getting paid north of $1 million. I think it was $1.2, $1.3 million. LSU came in yesterday and upped the ante a little bit, and Texas declined to match. And some people are frustrated because they view the job that Bo Davis has done, with, of course, this year being the most prominent example, with the development of T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy on that defensive line, uh, developing them, making them into possibly day one, early day two kind of guys in the NFL draft. Something that Texas hasn't done on the defensive line in a while, since like what, Malcolm Roach was drafted, I think, in the first round.
Yeah, I think there was a D tackle that went to the Patriots as well. I don't think he went early though. I think his name was like Malcolm Brown or something like that. No, that was the running back. It was something Brown. I believe went to the Patriots in the third or second round. But yeah, it hasn't been much. The thing I would say to that is, just the counterpoint, I guess, would be he didn't really get much out of the edge group, outside of, what's that kid's name? Sorry, I had like the white player the on the edge group, out of the edge group.
Ethan Burke.
Ethan Burke. Sorry, yeah. Outside of Ethan Burke, he struggled to get a whole lot out of that edge group. Um, so that would be the counterpoint to that. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely reason to be a little frustrated because it's not like Texas is running short on funds.
I think Bo Davis, I don't think was primarily responsible for the edge group, but people are frustrated because Bo Davis, and he's proven it, back in his days at Alabama and throughout what has been a very successful coaching career so far. He's proven to be one of the better developers of defensive line talent in college football, period. And there's a reason that LSU wanted him, not just because he's from LSU. Like, Bo Davis is Bo Davis. There's a
Yeah.
reason he was on Alabama's staff for so many years, and Nick Saban wanted him on his staff. The thing, look, Texas declined to match the offer, and they would have had to go 1.2, 1.3 million up to like 1.5, 1.6 million. The problem with doing that, though, that people aren't thinking about is if you give Bo Davis a raise, well, now Blake Gideon, the secondary coach, is going to ask for a raise. Now the quarterback's coach is going to ask for a raise. Now the running backs coach is going to ask for a raise. Now the wide receivers coach is going to ask for a raise. Now Kyle Flood's going to want a raise. And then your coordinators are going to want a raise as well. And you're about to pay Sark the bag.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that Texas couldn't have done that. Texas is dripping with money, like you said. But Chris Del Conte, while he has all this money, I think has been very smart in allocating it. That's one of the reasons that they have the coaching staff that they do. And they just hired Johnny Nansen, and who knows how much they're going to need to pay him. So, look, I'm disappointed. Bo Davis is a great football coach. I would have loved for him to stay at Texas. What he did with T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy was absolutely incredible. But he's going back to his alma mater.
Yeah, if Texas were to have matched, would he have for sure stayed? There's a chance that he would have still been like, I want to go to my alma mater.
That's where sources within the industry think he would have stayed.
Okay.
But that's where it gets a little iffy. That's where there's a gray area here because his son plays at Southeastern Mississippi, some small school in the South. And the story behind the scenes that has been reported by a couple different industry sources is that his son, he wants to coach his son at some point, which is totally fair. And it was much, much easier to get his son into LSU than it was to get him into Texas. It was just an easier situation for him to transfer to LSU than it was to the University of Texas. And so I think his son's going to end up getting into LSU because one of the promises that Brian Kelly made to Bo Davis, if he took the job, was we will make sure that your son is able to come play football for us and that you're able to coach your son. And I'm not sure that Texas was either ready to do that or told him that they would do that or whatever the case may be.
Different
So
academic standards.
it is what it is. Here's what I'll say. I haven't really heard any names yet on the defensive line coaching front because now Texas needs a replacement for Bo Davis. But if you look at defensive line recruiting for Texas under Bo Davis, let's just take out the edges for a minute because I think there are other coaches involved in recruiting edge talent. Like Bo Davis was not a primary recruiter of Colin Simmons. He was not a primary recruiter of Ethan Burke. He just wasn't. He was more kind of the guy who got Sadir Mitchell in last year's class. Those interior big body guys, that's Bo Davis. Not to say that he did a bad job recruiting because he's actually done a fairly decent job recruiting. But Texas, while it might be hard to find a guy that's as good at purely developing talent in college football at the defensive line position than Bo Davis, Texas thinks they can find, and Sark thinks he can find, a better recruiter than Bo Davis. And I think that's a trade-off that if you're Texas, you're probably willing to make. When's the last time Texas landed like a 5-star monster on the interior of the defensive line?
Can't think of one.
Devondre Sweat wasn't it.
No.
He was a 3-star. Byron Murphy wasn't it. He was a low 4-star. And in fact, those guys weren't even recruited by what am I even thinking? Those guys were Tom Herman guys.
Right.
So, yeah, I think where they'll go. They'll still look for a good defensive line coach. Texas is going to get a good defensive line coach. But I think they're going to go for more of the big-time recruiter. That's definitely an attribute that they'll look for in their next defensive line coach. So that maybe in the future we can land like, say, a Walter Nolan or a Jordan Davis kind of blue chip guy on the interior of our defensive line, because chances are those guys are going to need less development than the 3 and 4 stars that come in that just aren't as physically developed, and you know what I mean.
Yeah. There are, exceptions. Like
Yep.
there's a 5-star at Miami that's been really struggling not struggling, but he's been leaving some to be desired, is what I've been reading. I read an athletic article about it. I can't think of his name, but he's one of those guys where I think he's going to be entering the draft, and there's going to be an NFL team that takes a chance on him in like the first 100 picks, but he's raw. He's a raw prospect in that sense.
Yeah. Okay. The other coaching news associated with Texas is Jeff Choate, who was the linebackers coach under Sark for the first 3 years of his tenure. He got the Nevada head coaching job. And so he left at the conclusion of Texas's season. So after the Washington game, he's out. So congratulations to him. Hope he does well there. They went out and they got their guy at linebackers coach, possibly even an upgrade over Jeff Choate. And Jeff Choate was an excellent coach. You saw the development of Jalen Ford the past couple of years. You saw Anthony Hill kind of slowly rise as the season went on as a true freshman. you saw the improvements that David Binda made over the course of the season. Jeff Choate was an excellent coach. There's a reason a program like Nevada wanted him to be their head coach. But they went out and they hired Johnny Nansen, who for the past year or two has been the defensive coordinator at Arizona. And so Texas got a defensive coordinator at a major program to come be a position coach at their program. Now, they're likely going to pay him more than they did at Arizona, surprisingly enough, but it's Texas. And Johnny Nansen is everything you could really want in a linebackers coach / co-defensive coordinator. That's going to be his official role at Texas. First of all, he's already been a defensive coordinator at multiple places, and Arizona was a top 30 defense this year, believe it or not. So
most notably shut down Washington for a lot of that game as well.
Yep. They had some very, very good defensive performances. They totally confused Jackson Arnold in his first start in the bowl game. And Jackson Arnold's a guy who I think is going to be really good at Oklahoma someday. But Johnny Nansen, his daughter's at UT in an intern role with the football program. So that makes sense. He's been with Sark before. He's actually coached with and under Sark before, all the way back to their days at USC, back to his days at Washington. They're really good friends. They know each other. And when you look at Sark's coaching staff, that's kind of what his coaching staff is. Guys that he knows, has familiarity with from other places that he's coached before. Kyle Flood, he was with at Bama. Pete Kwiatkowski, he has those Washington ties. The other guys that came over from Bama, including Bo Davis. These are guys that, for the most part, he knows, he has close ties with, he has good relationships with, and that's been a big pillar of the way that he's building this program is relationships, culture, and good fits. And I think Johnny Nansen will do an excellent job not only developing guys like Anthony Hill and Leona LaFau, who's probably going to play a bigger role next year, and whoever Texas brings in the future at the linebacker position, but he's also going to add more knowledge overall to this defense. I think he's a guy that can help PK Kwiatkowski, the defensive coordinator, a little bit with his background on the defensive side of the ball. I think he'll be good at developing talent. He'll be a good, solid football coach, but I think this guy is going to be a dog in recruiting. I think you're going to see Texas linebacker recruiting possibly really take off now that Johnny Nansen has moved to Texas.
Yeah,
what do you think?
Sure. My thinking is, I think for Texas, you want the front seven of your defense to be on the same page of your, back four. Like that's really. It's not that was a problem, but I think there was still another level that needed to go in order for the defense to be, one of the top in the country, which is where they want to be. And Arizona, they had, like you said, a complex defense, and they could do a multitude of different coverages and run them at a very high level. So with him in the building, I think I would expect Texas to add more of that to their repertoire, and hopefully limit some of the pass attacks that are in the SEC.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's really all that needs to be said there. I think it's a higher. I'm not giving it an A+ because I want to leave that little tiny room for him to, exceed my expectations. But it's a really solid hire by Sark. And he's done a good job so far of making these kinds of hires. Remember, he's already had to replace a receivers coach, and he went and got Chris Jackson. And we saw the dividends that paid with Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell. As Chris Jackson was a guy that before he came to Texas this year was at Jacksonville with the Jaguars last year, and he turned Christian Kirk into what was it, a Pro Bowl season, a 1,000-yard season.
Yeah.
Zay Jones had a very good year last. He did a very good job with that receiving group. Has NFL experience. What people just weren't sure about with Chris Jackson is his recruiting prowess, because he never done it at the college level, and recruiting is totally different than the way you manage personnel at the NFL level. But I mean, hell, just bring in Ryan Ringo while you're at it. In your first year, just go get possibly the best receiver in the country. So that worked out. Kyle Flood's worked out. I mean, Kelvin Banks, DJ Campbell, the list goes on and on. Think about the development of Jake Majors. Have you all heard of this crazy Zach Wilson thing? Now, what is that, Jameson?
I'm going to look that up right now. Oh gosh, with knowing Zach Wilson's history.
When you say Zach Wilson thing, I'm getting kind of scared. Are we gonna get canceled for talking about this?
Is he trending on Twitter again? Oh gosh. Okay.
Wilson was caught at a gay bar. Jameson says Wilson was caught at a gay bar. I don't know if this is true, but that's what he said in the chat.
I mean, that's not that crazy, bro.
I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it is.
No. I'm saying like directly to Jameson. Like, I mean, it is what it is, bro. Like, people be gay out here. I mean, that's how it is, man.
Okay. We do have one more segment to get to. I will shy away from talking about that, and let's talk about Ohio State and what they've done in the portal so far, just a little bit. They go out after, of course, Kyle McCord transfers, and they get Will Howard in the portal, the quarterback from Kansas State. Will Howard was a guy who visited, I think, USC and a couple other programs, but he ultimately settles in Ohio State. They bring in Keyshawn Judkins, the running back from Ole Miss. That was a big pickup for them. We don't know what
3 touchdowns this year, was it? 22 touchdowns, something like that?
I think in total. I think it was 16 rushing touchdowns, but maybe in total he had 22, 23 touchdowns. Was an all SEC caliber guy. We still don't know the future of Trevion Henderson. He's yet to make his NFL draft decision or a declaration on his future. My guess is he probably goes to the NFL, but I don't know for sure. And then their other running back, Trainum, he transferred. So they were in need of a running back. They got the best one that was available, and it seemed to happen pretty quickly. They get, I think, an upgrade at quarterback with Will Howard over a young Kyle McCord. And then they go get like an all SEC caliber offensive lineman at the center position who has tons of experience in Seth McLaughlin, the Alabama center. So what Ryan Day, just solely on the offensive side of the ball, has done in the portal is pretty damn good. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. First, I'll lead with this. If you're new here, this is going to be a segment where we cover one program every single episode of Dit Hole, where we go through their transfer portal moves. If that sounds like something that would be interesting to you, subscribe to the channel. But here's what I'll say. I mean, the level of urgency for Ohio State, I mean, it's clearly there right now. Bringing in a running back of that caliber, I think it's clear that they want to be a more physical team. They want to establish themselves in the run game, in the trenches, and not be more like Michigan, but be able to counteract Michigan. Like there's no changing, the like level of wide receiver talent Ohio State brings in every year. Like you don't want to change that. You still want to do those things, but when you need to play a rock fight, can you win a rock fight? Is really the question. And the last 3 years, the answer has been no. And they've gotten close, a few actually, okay, that's not fair. The answer isn't no. They did win against Notre Dame and all that type of stuff, but against Michigan, I mean, in that style of game, the answer was no. So, and that's where they want to be. It's like in the NFL, if one team in your division gets Patrick Mahomes, you're gonna go and get defensive backs and pass rushers. Like that's just how it is. So now Ohio State's going into the trenches and building that up, like trying to get a elite running game going, and I think it's the right decision. It's the right move.
I think so as well. More big news for Ohio State today. Number one, Marvin Harrison Jr. declared for the draft, which we all expected. But Emeka Egbuka, who was their number 2, is coming back for his senior season.
Ooh.
So
Okay.
he will return to the program for 1 year. He's going to come back to Columbus in his final year of eligibility with
I actually like that decision for him.
with plenty
Really loaded
still left,
receiver class.
with plenty still to prove. Now remember, back in 2022, he topped 1,000 yards receiving as a sophomore. So he's a really damn good receiver, and I think he's ready to step into that kind of number 1 alpha role in that receiving room. But he did miss a month of this past regular season with an ankle injury. He still finished with a fairly productive season, 41 catches, 515 yards, and 4 touchdowns. But it wasn't nearly the season that he had in his sophomore year, partly due to the injury. So I think it kind of makes sense when you look at that and some other factors with the loaded receiver class that we have coming up in this draft for him to return to Ohio State. He can be the focal point of the passing offense, and he now, I'd argue, has a better quarterback to throw him the football in Will Howard, who has won a conference championship at the major college football level, played in big games before, maybe not the big game, but he's played in big games before. He's played in hostile environments before in the Big 12. So, and he's experienced and proven as at least a solid college quarterback. Like he will, I think, be one of the better, higher end quarterbacks in the Big Ten, no doubt, next year. Because we don't know what's going to go. We know who Oregon's guy's going to be, and he's good, but we don't know what Washington's going to do. I mean, Penix is likely gone. What's JJ McCarthy going to do? Is he going to come back? So, Caleb Williams is gone. Malachi Nelson, their 5-star recruit, he transferred. So what situation is USC in right now at the quarterback spot?
Right. Dante Moore left UCLA as well.
Exactly. He's at Oregon now. So
is he? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's going to, I think, take another year, maybe sit behind Dylan Gabriel, and then be the guy at Oregon.
Yeah, I think he went in too early. That's a smart move for him.
I mean, I think, look, while Michigan's winning the national championship, and that's great, and Ohio State fans probably aren't too happy about that, they're at least building what looks like a very, very strong top 8 caliber team for next year. They just got to figure out how to beat Michigan. That's all it really comes down to.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they are winning 11, 12 games this season.
Right. And the good news for them is the Michigan game likely won't be a playoff game next year. I think still going to be important, obviously. Like it's always going to be a fixture of the Ohio
Yeah.
State football team beating Michigan. That's always going to be a goal, but it's not going to decide your entire season. And ultimately, I mean, I think they were right there and winning that game, and it's unfortunate how it ended. But I think there's like a fixture of Ohio State fans that are going after Ryan Day's head right now, and I mean I get it. I mean he's lost to Michigan 3 years in a row, but at the same time, it's just it's hard to win, man. Like that's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I mean, hell, I mean, not everybody is Nick Saban or Kirby Smart. Um,
Yeah,
while you don't have to, well, it's not going to come down, and I agree with you. Like, you're no longer going to have to, like, if you are sitting at, say, you're sitting at 11-0 somehow, you no longer have to win that Michigan game to possibly play in the Big Ten championship or for your play to keep your playoff hopes alive. Because number one, divisions are going away. Like there's no more Big Ten East, Big Ten West crap, and you're adding teams to your conference, and it's totally changing. So while you don't have necessarily one must-win game on your schedule anymore, you do have to also account for the fact that next year you got to go to Oregon and play at Autzen. That's a tough game you didn't have before.
yeah,
You still got to go to Penn State. You still got to play Michigan. And I think Ohio State actually came out fairly well on the schedule side of things because they don't have like a Texas in their non-conference like Michigan does next year.
yeah,
And to be fair, we don't know what Jim Harbaugh is going to do. Is he going to leave for the NFL? Is he going to stay at Michigan? We don't know what JJ McCarthy is going to do. That Michigan team could look totally different next year. I think Blake Corum's gone.
A funny
There,
thought just popped in my head. Sorry.
Jake Junior Colson, the linebacker, just declared today. So I'm assuming there's more of those things coming.
Yeah,
So we will see. What were you going to say?
yeah. That funny thought just popped in my head. What if Jim Harbaugh pulled a reverse Kevin Durant and went to Alabama to coach? I
You
feel like
know, that's
that
a
would
name
be
we
pretty
did.
nuts.
That's a name we didn't
I
even
wouldn't rule it
consider,
out though.
but I mean, you can't rule anything out in college football nowadays. Uh,
Yeah.
Anything else we need to touch on the Ohio State front? I came up with this idea. I thought maybe we could do two programs per episode, but it was probably too much. And we
Yeah, it
have a
depends
bunch.
on the episode, I guess.
Yeah, we have a bunch of time, so we'll just start with one each episode, and then depending on the episode, we can figure it out. I think this will help us take a smoother transition into spring ball and the season next year than we've had in past years, where it's just kind of been
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
5 months
exactly.
without talking any
It's
college
nice
football.
having a show like this where we can just have all of our college stuff.
Yeah,
Because I feel like on like before we were just spread too thin on like the raw prospect podcast side of things. Like we were trying to do NBA, we were trying to do like we were even trying to throw in like WNBA. We were just trying to do everything, and
mm-hmm.
it's too much.
Yeah, and I think this is working out great.
Yeah,
So that's gonna pretty much wrap up tonight's Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports Edition emergency episode for the Nick Saban retirement announcement. We talked about that here for the first 40 minutes, and for the past 30 minutes, we've been talking about Texas coaching stuff and Ohio State portal stuff. So if you are an Ohio State fan, there you go. If you're, and you know why I wanted to do this? One of the reasons I wanted to do this, you know what people are clicking on right now on YouTube? Nick Saban videos.
yeah.
coaching videos. Like Josh Pate, for example. I know he has an established, obviously, one of the biggest platforms and established, what do you call them, fan bases or listener bases in the industry. But he did his impromptu Nick Saban coaching reaction last night in his first ever impromptu late kick live. And it was his most watched. It automatically was his most watched show that he's ever done. Yeah, people tend to, when the story's hot like this, people want to know people's thoughts. And so,
yeah,
we'll see how this episode does. But with that being said, thank you to Emmy. Thank you to our listeners, including Jameson and who's the other guy?
John Sam, yeah.
John Sam.
Shout out to John Sam
for the Evan Neal stuff. I really
name.
enjoyed that. Or the Neil Brown. I don't. Yeah. Why did I say Evan
it was
Neal?
So random. Yeah, I don't. That threw me off guard.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll continue to do Dit Hole most likely 2 times a week. So thank you guys. Yep. Keep it tuned here for Texas and all stuff college football and college basketball. And one last thing, actually. I know it's been crazy with coaching stuff, and that stuff's obviously going to get the headlines. But in the past 48 hours since we talked college basketball, number 1 team lost, number 2 team lost, number 3 team lost, number 5 team lost.
Yep.
It's crazy right now.
Yeah.
Things are off the rails. So we'll address that at a point down the road. But until then, hook 'em horns. Please don't leave us, Sark. I know you won't. And Quinn is back. Quinn is back. I can't believe it took us until the hour 13 mark to mention that. But Quinn Ewers is officially back. And we'll see you next time on Deep in the Heart.
I've got an outro for today.
Okay.
Just like the Zach Wilson MILF jokes, we are going, gone. Peace out. Hook 'em.
What?